Tonight, into the hot zone. U.S. forces fight into the heart of Fallujah and casualties mount. You'll hear from reporters deep inside the battle. A CBS News exclusive. The chief U.S. weapons hunter in Iraq narrowly escapes a suicide car bomb attack. Is this the one that really works? A big new study finds an experimental diet pill helps you drop pounds and keep them off. Also, women's work. Our special series gives you a look at the challenge of returning to the workplace after years at home with the kids.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. It's fast, it's furious, and it's lethal. Thousands of U.S. Marines and Army soldiers drove rapidly today into the heart of Fallujah. 3 American troops are officially listed as killed in the fighting. The total may be more. The 48-hour total for U.S. military personnel killed in all of Iraq is at least 16. The number of wounded is not clear. The number of Iraqis, including Iraqi civilians and others killed, unknown. In a matter of hours, the assault in Fallujah moved from the outskirts to the city's center. Heavy U.S. firepower sweeping through enemy resistance. Tonight, CBS's Elizabeth Palmer is in Fallujah with the U.S. Marines. Kirk Spitzer is with U.S. Army Special Forces, and Kimberly Dozier is in Baghdad. Combat correspondent Elizabeth Palmer begins our coverage.
It wasn't a day for subtlety, as about 6,000 American Marines and soldiers, supported by 2,000 Iraqi troops, punched their way into the center of Fallujah. CBS News reporter Kirk Spitzer, who is with U.S. and Iraqi Special Forces, says commanders are pleased.
There have been pockets of resistance, but so far nothing resembling a final stand. That could change soon as insurgents retreat to the city's western enclaves. So far, troops on the western side of the river have not attempted to cross into the city, waiting perhaps to trap the rebels between the river and the advancing troops from the east.
They secured Fallujah's railway station. A key highway that runs through Fallujah was secured by late morning. By late evening, troops were heading south and digging into a city where residents report supplies of water and power have been cut off. General Thomas Metz is operational commander for the whole of Iraq.
I think we're looking at several more days of tough urban fighting.
Last night, the Marines went into attack formation on the eastern outskirts of the city. A fierce artillery barrage targeted rebels firing mortars, while phosphorus shells lit up the sky. Their white-hot fallout will burn through anything it lands on. At dawn, a pall of smoke hung over the city, damage from the attack clearly visible even at a distance. The heavy aerial bombardment from overnight continued well into the morning, but by afternoon it had slowed, and so had the ground artillery barrage. The U.S. troops are simply not firing as many shells or dropping as many bombs into Fallujah because too many of their own troops are inside. As the day wore on, a family appeared on the eastern edge of town on what had been their grazing land. Oh yes, they cried during the night, says their father, but in the daylight this little boy said he understands what it was all about. They are dropping bombs on the terrorists, he says. This Iraqi Special Forces soldier told them for their own safety to go home. U.S. and Iraqi forces moving further into Fallujah could push the fighting this way. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News with the Marines near Fallujah.
In many places around Iraq, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of guerrilla and terrorist attacks. At least 130 violent incidents yesterday alone. And CBS News has learned that one top U.S. official in Iraq, weapons hunter Charles Dulfer, became a target. CBS's David Barton has exclusive details.
As a reminder of how the war in Iraq began, Charles Dulfer, the man in charge of the fruitless search for weapons of mass destruction, narrowly missed being killed by a suicide car bomber. As it was, 2 of his security guards were killed. Dulfer was traveling in the second vehicle of a 4-vehicle convoy on Monday morning on the road between Baghdad and the international airport when the car bomber tried to ram him. The bomber was cut off by the security guards who were following in a chase car. Quoting from a brief email Dulfer sent to CBS News, "Killed 2 in chase car, destroys my car. Where do they get so many people who want to kill themselves?" he asked.
Fallujah may be the main stronghold of the insurgency, but terrorists are operating throughout the middle of the country. attacking Americans and their Iraqi allies any way they can.
At Baghdad International Airport today, a shoulder-fired missile was launched at a transport plane. Insurgents have tried and failed before to shoot down aircraft. They failed again, but they did succeed in shutting the airport down to all military traffic. American forces enjoy overwhelming advantages in technology and firepower. In this video from the assault on Fallujah, a bomb dropped by a jet fighter is used to detonate a string of booby traps laid in the road. But all that technology and firepower has yet to bring anything resembling peace and security to the heartland of Iraq. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
Now to CBS's veteran war correspondent Kimberly Dozier in Baghdad with more on the surging attacks that have engulfed so much of Iraq since the Fallujah offensive began.
Militants in Iraq continue their nationwide campaign of violence today, rampaging through the city of Ramadi near Fallujah. Hundreds of gunmen briefly seized the town center before U.S. and Iraqi forces drove them out. Around Bakuba, further north in the Sunni Triangle, insurgents stormed 3 police stations with small arms and rocket-propelled grenades. Al-Qaeda-linked militant Abu Musab al-Zarqawi later claimed responsibility on an extremist website. A U.S. Embassy official tells CBS News to expect more of the same. They already had intelligence that militants planned a series of bombings to coincide with the Fallujah assault. They also expect insurgents to use religious and political leaders to try to turn public opinion against the coalition and the Iraqi government to halt the American charge. Several Sunni clerics, some exiled from Fallujah, are already calling for a nationwide sit-in. The main Sunni political party has pulled out of government and called for a boycott of January elections. But U.S. officials hope most Iraqis will see the Fallujah assault as the only way to fight terror. Iraqis are tired, he says. They want to end the car bomb attacks and kidnappings. The Americans say only time and the intensity of the conflict in Fallujah will determine whether Iraqis accept their government's action or turn protest into a battle-stopping roar. As the conflict plays out, this city and the country are braced for further violence, especially with the 27th day of Ramadan on Wednesday, known as the Night of Power. That's when would-be martyrs receive the highest possible blessing for attacking their enemies. Kimberly Dozier, CBS News, Baghdad.
With intense fighting in Fallujah and the rise of guerrilla and terror attacks elsewhere, American casualties seem certain to mount. Since the start of the war in March 2003, at least 1,141 U.S. military personnel have been killed and well over 8,000 others wounded. Today, President and Mrs. Bush visited wounded troops at Walter Reed Army Hospital in Washington.
Such an honor to meet the troops who've been wounded, and it's so uplifting to see their spirit, their drive to become rehabilitated, their love of their country.
Also in Washington, the expected Bush cabinet shuffle has begun tonight. The first resignations, Attorney General John Ashcroft and Commerce Secretary Don Evans. CBS's Wyatt Andrews is in our Washington bureau with late details. Wyatt?
Dan, in a handwritten letter accepted by the president, Attorney General John Ashcroft resigned this afternoon, becoming the highest-ranking cabinet leader in the war on terror to leave the administration. Ashcroft helped plot the strategy for internal security after 9/11. He was often the front man announcing the change in threat levels facing the country, and the man who detained mostly thousands of mostly Muslim immigrants, believing that strategy would catch anyone else planning to attack. Critics accused Ashcroft of civil rights violations, but there was no second attack. And Ashcroft's resignation letter claims, quote, the safety of Americans from crime and terror has been achieved. Ashcroft was known to suffer health problems this year, and he resigned, according to his letter, to give the Justice Department fresh leadership. Dan?
Wyatt Andrews reporting live from our Washington bureau. Thanks. On Capitol Hill today, Senator John Kerry made his first public comment since he conceded the election. Kerry talked about what he won't concede. He said he'd use the rest of his Senate term, 4 more years, to press the fight for health care, jobs, and improving the economy. Returning to Iraq, the mounting toll of dead and wounded soldiers and Marines is a special burden for those on the home front, where family members, along with the rest of the nation, hope and pray for the safety of loved ones. CBS's Sandra Hughes reports from Camp Pendleton, California, home base for many of the Marines in Fallujah.
Diane DePaulo is living every military mother's nightmare.
I regret any of the casualties we have.
Knowing her son Adam, a Marine, is in Fallujah, she puts together a care package she prays he'll stay alive long enough to open.
You can't do anything. You can't do a thing. All you do is pray. That's all you can do.
Part of the country.
You have no control.
She's supported by other military families who communicate through a website called MarineParents.com. Since Fallujah, the website has been flooded. Diane is grateful for Adam's last email.
I want you to try to not worry while I'm gone.
And a phone call she got last week.
He said, Mom, I'll be okay.
I told him before he left, I said, I don't want anybody knocking on my door.
This morning, Amanda Reese learned that her husband was one of the first to die in Fallujah.
He's a great person.
Camp Pendleton here in Oceanside, California, has already lost at least 150 Marines during the Iraqi war. Now this community is bracing for news of more casualties as the battle rages on the other side of the world. Sue Bellin and Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Lasecki are trying to keep their law practice afloat, while Sue's husband and Joseph's law partner, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Bellin, is in Fallujah. Lasecki says there's no other option but to win.
We're not going to lose it. There's no way.
Waiting for word about her son, Diane DePaulo holds tight to his last gift to her. It's called a comfort quilt.
This right here rests underneath my cheek every night.
But she'll find no real comfort until she hears her son has survived. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Camp Pendleton.
Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, caught on audio tape, the near collision of two crowded jetliners. You will hear the pilots and the control tower, and we'll give you the inside story. Then later, is this the real deal diet pill? The experimental drug that appears to help people lose weight and, more importantly, keep it off. But first, CBS News honors fallen heroes. The Army gave Cody Eckhart new confidence. Though legally blind in one eye, he became a good marksman. He enjoyed making people laugh, and friends loved hearing his stories. Eckhart was killed when his truck was attacked. He'd had an omen and told his buddy, "Let me drive." It saved his buddy's life. That's how Eckhart was, always putting others first. The airline industry is coming in for more turbulence. First, there's the drinking water. Federal regulators ordered stringent new tests of water served to airline passengers after inspections turned up too many germs in some planes' water tanks. Also today, the first large-scale test of a computer system designed to increase air traffic without reducing safety was canceled at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport because it allowed some close calls. And then there's belated word of what happened last summer at Los Angeles International Airport, a frightening near miss caught on audio tape. CBS's Bob Orr gives you the inside story.
An Asiana 747 with hundreds of passengers on board was just 2 miles out and 45 seconds from touchdown when controllers in Los Angeles cleared a departing Southwest Airlines plane onto the same runway.
Southwest 440, runway 24 left position and hold.
The Southwest 737 began rolling towards its takeoff position, unaware the Asiana jumbo jet was closing in, now just a mile away.
Southwest 440, runway 24 left, cleared for takeoff.
Suddenly, in the LAX control tower, a runway alert system like this one sounded.
Warning, departure.
There was little time to react. With the planes just a half-mile apart and 12 seconds from colliding, the Asiana pilot pulled up the nose of his jumbo jet. As it passed just 185 feet above the Southwest plane, controllers issued their only warning.
Southwest 440, cancel takeoff clearance, hold in position.
Holding in position, Southwest 440.
Nearby, a pilot who witnessed the near collision reacted.
That was close. Close.
The near catastrophe was frighteningly reminiscent of a 1991 runway crash in Los Angeles. 33 people were killed when a U.S. air jet landed on top of a commuter plane waiting to take off. In the past 4 years, the FAA says, runway accidents and near collisions have dropped more than 20%.
We are very encouraged that between technology and training, we'll continue to be able to reduce them.
But federal safety investigators question whether the FAA is accurately counting all runway incursions. At a minimum, the recent close call in L.A. is proof that serious safety challenges remain. Bob Orr, CBS News, Washington.
Next here on the CBS Evening News, a new approach to weight loss. We'll report to you about the experimental diet pill that appears to help people lose weight and not gain it back. The Bush administration today asked the U.S. Supreme Court to block the nation's only state law allowing doctor-assisted suicides. Since the law took effect in Oregon in 1998, doctors there have helped about 170 terminally ill patients take their own lives. The government filed 6 lawsuits today against makers of weight loss products, alleging they made claims that were too good to be true. Which brings us to an experimental drug that does appear to help people lose and keep off pounds. CBS News medical correspondent Elizabeth Callahan is here now with details. Elizabeth, what's the skinny?
Well, Dan, the new drug is called Fallujah. It's still experimental, meaning it hasn't been approved by the FDA, but there are high hopes that this could be the magic weight loss pill both doctors and the overweight have been hoping for. Latest study results just released show that more than 3,000 people taking the highest dose of Fallujah lost an average of 19 pounds in 1 year and reduced their waistlines by more than 3 inches. Most kept the weight off in the second year of the trial, and only moderate change in diet and calorie intake was required. Dan.
So, Elizabeth, what's the secret? What makes this pill different?
Well, Dan, this drug is the first of its kind to target the pleasure center of the brain, the part of the brain that controls cravings and satisfaction and that drives many people to overeat. There are very high expectations, but still many questions about long-term safety issues. Its manufacturer is expected to seek FDA approval sometime next year. Dan?
Elizabeth Callahan, thanks. Interesting. For the first time in over a year, pedestrians can walk past the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue. First Lady Laura Bush dedicated the new walkway, now with more eye-pleasing security precautions. The avenue was closed to road traffic after the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. Next on the CBS Evening News, they left careers to take care of the kids. Now, years later, can they return to the workforce? CBS's special Eye on America series, Women's Work, is next.
The CBS Evening News and tonight's Eye on America segment are sponsored by Aflac. Ask about it at work.
We at CBS in tonight with more of our special Eye on America series, Women's Work. The government reports the fastest growing segment in the U.S. workforce is women with young children. What the government doesn't say is that many women, once on the fast track at work, gave it up years ago to take care of their children. Now, these moms want to return to work, and CBS's Mika Brzezinski has been working the story.
When Ann Marcus was pregnant with her 3rd child, she decided to take a leave of absence from her career.
It was becoming harder and harder to balance it.
A leave that lasted 7 years.
You don't want a PBJ? What do you want to have?
It seemed like the right thing to do, until her daughter dropped this one on her.
And she said, I don't see why I have to do my schoolwork. I'm just going to grow up and stay home like you do.
That propelled Ann into reconsidering work, joining these women at a networking seminar. Women who, like her, once had fast-track careers.
And the last job was in the trust and private banking area.
I was a project officer for an international nonprofit.
I was a litigation attorney doing products liability work.
On average, this group has been out of work for 10 years, and now they want back in.
Work is about skills, and you all do have skills.
Call them sequencing moms. Forget trying to balance simultaneous family and career. A trend now is to allow for seasons in life, saying you can have it all, just not all at the same time.
I loved it and hated leaving, but I had 2 children, so it just wasn't going to work.
Sylvia Ann Hewlett of the Center for Work-Life Policy says that 2/3 of women who left work to raise children,
it's not at all easy to get back in,
want to re-enter professional life.
There is a feeling often in companies that women who've been out have lost their skills, lost their networks, and so there clearly is a reluctance to hire.
Her recommendation, don't stop working.
That if you can take a slow lane, take one of these reduced hour jobs, it's much better than taking an off-ramp.
These women are looking for the on-ramp leading back to work, just not necessarily the same job.
And it just needs to be interesting and challenging and, compensate me enough to cover the babysitter.
You're going to try and get back into full-time work?
No.
I would love to do something part-time.
Their biggest roadblock may not be getting a job.
How many of you have husbands who are ready for you to go back to work as long as it doesn't affect them in any way?
Not a problem for Ann Marcus, who's confident about her next step.
I think we know that we can have what we want. I don't think we have to be content to take someone else's word for what we can have.
As she considers the options for the next season in her life. In Ridgefield, Connecticut, I'm Mika Brzezinski for Eye on America.
Part of our world tonight. Tomorrow, CBS's Women's Work series rolls on with a look at how some companies are working hard to keep their female employees. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, click on cbsnews.com. Brought to you in part by Walmart, saving you and your family time and money with everyday low prices. How some companies are working hard to keep their female employees. Eye on America tomorrow. Experience CBS News.